At exactly 8:17 on a humid Monday evening, my phone buzzed while I was folding towels in the laundry room. I smiled automatically, expecting another picture of somebody's grandkids or a reminder from work. Instead, I saw a selfie from Cancun. My best friend was kissing my husband. Beneath the picture, she had typed one sentence that turned 20 years of my life into something I barely recognized. "I ran away with your husband. We're never coming back." My name is Emily Carter, and I was 43 years old when I learned that betrayal doesn't always sound like shouting. Sometimes it arrives with sunshine blue water and two smiling faces who think they've already won. I stared at the screen for what felt like several minutes, though later I checked the timestamp. It had only been 23 seconds. Jason was wearing the navy polo shirt I'd bought him for Father's Day 3 years earlier. Nicole had on oversized sunglasses and one of those floppy beach hats she'd been talking about for months. Behind them stretched white sand and water so blue it almost looked fake. They looked happy. Really happy. That hurt more than I expected. I carried my phone into the kitchen and set it face down on the counter. My coffee maker still held the last cup from that morning. The dishwasher hummed quietly. Outside, somebody was mowing a lawn down the street in our Carmel, Indiana neighborhood. Everything around me looked painfully ordinary. I picked up my phone again. There was another message. "Don't try calling. Jason chose me. You can have the house." A few seconds later, another notification appeared. This one came from Jason. I should have done this years ago. I laughed. Not because anything was funny, because my brain simply refused to process what my eyes were reading. 3 days earlier, Jason had kissed me goodbye in our driveway before leaving for what he called a regional sales conference in Dallas. He even complained about airport security while packing. Nicole had told me she was joining 2 women from church for a wellness retreat in Nashville. Apparently, both of them had practiced those lies together. I poured myself the stale coffee anyway. It tasted awful. I drank it without noticing. Then Jason texted again. "Don't embarrass yourself begging me to come home." I looked at the message for a long time. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. A dozen angry replies flashed through my mind. Instead, I typed 2 words. "Good luck." I pressed send. That was it. No questions. No insults. No crying emojis. Nothing else. About 30 seconds passed before my phone rang. Jason. I let it ring until voicemail picked up. He called again. Ignored. Nicole called. Ignored. By then, I knew something they had clearly forgotten. Every major financial account in our marriage had started with me. When Jason and I married 11 years earlier, my credit score was over 800. His wasn't even close. My financial advisor had suggested keeping the mortgage solely in my name because I had purchased the house before we met. Jason agreed at the time. He even joked that marrying me was like marrying my excellent credit. Neither of us laughed now. I opened my banking app. Our joint checking account held enough money to cover household bills. But every credit card, mine. Jason was simply an authorized user. Same with the travel rewards card. Same with the Visa. Same with the American Express. He had never bothered opening his own accounts because using mine was easier. Nicole probably believed he was successful. She'd always admired his expensive truck, his golf clubs, his business trips. She never asked who actually paid the statements every month. I called the first bank. "Good evening, this is Michelle. How may I help you? I need to remove an authorized user from all my accounts." She verified my identity. Within 5 minutes, Jason's cards were dead. The second bank took another 8 minutes. The third took 6. Each representative asked if I was certain. Every time I answered the same way. Yes. My voice stayed strangely calm, almost detached, as if I were helping somebody else solve their problem. Then I logged into our cell phone account, changed the password. Streaming services, password. Cloud storage, password. Home security system, password. Garage door app, password. Nicole texted again. "Jason says you're freezing the cards. Seriously?" I smiled for the first time all evening. I didn't answer. Instead, I opened my contacts and called Thompson Lock and Key. A sleepy man answered. "I know you're closed," I said, "but can someone replace every exterior lock tomorrow morning? We've got an opening around 7. I'll take it." After hanging up, I walked through every room in my house. Our house. No, my house. The family photos suddenly looked different. Jason holding our Labrador before she passed away. Christmas mornings. Cookouts. Vacations. I wasn't questioning whether those memories had happened. I was wondering how many of them had been honest. Around 10 o'clock, my older sister Laura called. "You okay?" I hadn't told her anything. "I got a weird feeling," she admitted. "You sound different." That broke me. Not completely. Just enough. I finally cried. Not loudly. Just sitting on the kitchen floor with my back against the cabinets while she stayed on the phone. "You don't have to decide your whole future tonight," Laura said quietly. "I know. You only have to get through tonight." After we hung up, I made myself a grilled cheese sandwich because I realized I hadn't eaten since lunch. I took 2 bites. Couldn't finish it. Before going upstairs, I checked my phone one last time. Jason had sent 7 more messages. "Call me." "Nicole's freaking out." "The hotel says the card's declined." "What are you doing?" "Emily." "Seriously?" "Answer me." I set the phone on my nightstand and turned off the light. For the first time in 11 years, I slept alone. Not well, but I slept. At 6:55 Tuesday morning, a white van from Thompson Lock and Key pulled into my driveway. 2 men spent almost an hour replacing every exterior lock. As they packed their tools, one of them handed me a ring of shiny new keys. "All set, ma'am." "Thank you." I had just closed the front door behind me when someone knocked. 3 firm knocks. Not Jason. Not Nicole. 2 uniformed police officers stood on my porch. One of them asked quietly, "Mrs. Emily Carter?" "Yes." "Ma'am, we need to ask you a few questions about your husband." For one strange second, I thought Jason had somehow convinced the police that I had locked him out illegally. That was where my mind went. Not fraud. Not crime. Just one more selfish stunt from a man who always believed every inconvenience in his life had to be someone else's fault. The older officer removed his hat. "I'm Detective Mark Ellis. This is Detective Rachel Moreno. May we come inside?" My stomach tightened. Of course. They stepped into the foyer, careful not to track rainwater across the hardwood floor. It had started drizzling while the locksmith finished changing the locks. I led them into the kitchen. The smell of fresh coffee filled the room. I had brewed a new pot after the locksmith left, hoping caffeine might help me think clearly. It didn't. Detective Ellis laid a small notebook on the table. "Mrs. Carter, when was the last time you saw your husband?" "Friday morning." "He told you where he was going?" "Dallas, a sales conference." The detectives exchanged a quick glance. "He wasn't in Dallas. I know that now." I picked up my phone and opened Nicole's message. "I found out last night." They studied the picture for several seconds. Neither looked surprised. Detective Moreno looked back at me. "Have either of them contacted you since then?" I slid the phone across the table. "Read whatever you need." For nearly 10 minutes, they quietly scrolled through every message Jason and Nicole had sent since the night before. Finally, Detective Ellis looked up. "Mrs. Carter, we need to ask you something that may sound unusual." "Go ahead." "Has your husband ever had access to your social security number?" My heart skipped. Yes, he knew where important documents were kept. Of course, they're in the office filing cabinet. "Were?" I corrected myself automatically. "They were." He nodded slowly. "That may explain part of what we're seeing." I frowned. "I'm sorry. Seeing what?" He took a folder from his briefcase. Inside were copies of financial records, loan applications, credit inquiries, account statements. None of them looked familiar. "Over the last 8 months," he said carefully, "someone opened 3 personal loans using your identity." I stared at him. "No." "The total exceeds $200,000. "No." I shook my head harder this time. "I never borrowed that money." "We believe you." I blinked. "You do?" "Yes." Detective Moreno spoke gently. "The signatures don't match yours. Neither do several IP addresses used to submit the applications." I felt lightheaded. "So, somebody stole my identity. We believe your husband may have." The room suddenly felt smaller. I leaned back in my chair. Jason had always handled little errands for us. Mail, packages, bank deposits if I was working late. I had trusted him without thinking. How many times had he quietly copied documents while I was making dinner or folding laundry? The thought made my skin crawl. "I don't understand." Detective Ellis folded his hands. "We've been investigating a group involved in identity fraud across Indiana and Illinois." He paused. "Your husband's name surfaced 3 weeks ago." I looked at him in disbelief. 3 weeks? "We couldn't make contact because he was pretending to be in Dallas." He nodded once. "We also have reason to believe another woman assisted him." I almost laughed. "You don't have to guess." I turned my phone toward them again. "Her name is Nicole Sanders." Detective Moreno wrote the name down. "How long have you known her?" 16 years. Would she have had access to your home? She practically lived here. Those words hurt more than I expected. Nicole had Thanksgiving dinner with us almost every year. She knew where I kept spare keys. She watered my plants whenever Jason and I traveled. She had celebrated birthdays in this kitchen. Now detectives were asking if she'd helped steal my identity. Life changes fast. Sometimes it changes before you even realize it's changing. For the next hour, they asked careful questions. Did Jason know my passwords? Sometimes. Did he handle taxes? No. Who usually paid household bills? I did. Whose name was on the mortgage? Mine. Whose name appeared on the credit cards? Mine. The detectives exchanged another glance. That detail seemed important. Before leaving, Detective Ellis handed me his business card. If either of them contacts you again, don't argue. Don't threaten them. I wasn't planning to. Good. He stood. And Mrs. Carter? Yes. You may receive notices from banks freezing certain accounts while we verify everything. My stomach dropped. My checking account? Possibly. But my paycheck goes there. I know. He looked genuinely sympathetic. I'm sorry. After they left, the silence inside the house became almost unbearable. I walked from room to room without accomplishing anything. I started vacuuming. Stopped after one room. Opened the refrigerator. Closed it again. Around noon, my bank called. Exactly as the detective predicted. Several accounts were temporarily restricted until identity theft investigators completed their review. The representative apologized 3 separate times. None of it was her fault. Still, hearing those words made me feel like I was somehow being punished. That afternoon, I drove to my office. Our company occupied a modest brick building near US 31. I had worked there for almost 14 years. As soon as I walked inside, my coworker Denise looked up. You look exhausted. I've had a strange morning. You need coffee. I've already had 4 cups. She smiled. I'll make it 5. An hour later, I quietly told my supervisor, Greg, what had happened. Not every detail, just enough. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. Emily, yeah. Take whatever time you need. I can't. You can. I've got bills. He looked at me for several seconds before opening a desk drawer. He handed me an envelope. The company has an emergency employee assistance fund. I can't accept this. It's not charity. I'll pay it back. You don't have to. That almost made me cry. People I'd worked beside every day were kinder than the 2 people I'd loved most. Late that evening, my phone buzzed again. Jason. Against my better judgment, I answered. What? His voice sounded irritated instead of ashamed. What did you do? I changed the locks. I mean the cards. I canceled them. You embarrassed me. I almost laughed. You embarrassed yourself. No, Emily, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. The hotel manager almost called security. That sounds stressful. He ignored the sarcasm. Just turn 1 card back on. No. We have nowhere to go. You told me you weren't coming back. Silence. Then he lowered his voice. Nicole quit her job. I know. She thought... He stopped. She thought what? Nothing. No, Jason. I waited. Finally, he sighed. She thought I had money. There it was. The truth had started leaking through the cracks. So, did she finally ask whose name was on the accounts? He didn't answer. Instead, he muttered something under his breath. Then the line went dead. I stood in my quiet kitchen looking at the phone. Not because I missed him. Because for the first time since Monday night, I realized something important. Neither of them had run away because they loved each other. They had run away chasing a life that never actually existed. And sooner or later, reality was going to catch both of them. By Thursday morning, 3 days after Jason and Nicole had disappeared to Cancun, my life had settled into a strange routine. Wake up, make coffee, answer calls from banks, forward documents to detectives, go to work, come home to a house that suddenly felt twice as large. Repeat. It wasn't the life I wanted, but routines have a way of keeping people moving when emotions threaten to stop them cold. One thing surprised me. I didn't miss Jason. I missed the person I thought he had been. Those are 2 very different kinds of grief. The identity theft investigation quickly became a second full-time job. Every lunch break, I found myself on the phone with another fraud department. Can you verify your previous address? What was the amount of your last mortgage payment? Did you authorize this credit inquiry? The questions never seemed to end. One afternoon, I sat in my car outside the office and cried, not because I wanted Jason back, but because I was exhausted. There is something deeply humiliating about proving you are yourself. Every conversation began with suspicion. Every document felt like another reminder that someone I trusted had quietly dismantled my life while sleeping beside me. Then, just when I thought the week couldn't get any stranger, my phone rang. Nicole. I stared at the screen. Part of me wanted to decline. Another part wanted answers. I answered. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Finally, she whispered, Emily. She sounded nothing like the woman smiling on that beach. What do you want? Her breathing was shaky. I need to explain. You've had several days. I didn't know. I closed my eyes. Didn't know what? He lied. I almost laughed. That's a pretty broad statement. He told me you were controlling him. Silence. He said you treated him like a child. More silence. He said the money was his. There it was. The sentence she'd been avoiding. My money. Our money, she corrected herself weakly. I thought everything belonged to both of you. It didn't. I know that now. I leaned against the kitchen counter. Outside, a neighbor was walking his golden retriever. Normal life kept happening. Mine had simply taken a detour. Nicole kept talking. When the cards stopped working, Jason said it was a banking mistake. I imagine that story didn't last long. No. The hotel manager wanted another card. He didn't have one. No. And, she hesitated. We had to move to a cheaper hotel. I didn't respond. The cheaper hotel wanted payment every day. Still nothing. We sold my bracelet, the one she'd proudly shown me last Christmas. A gift from her late mother. I remembered telling her to insure it. Now she'd sold it to stay in Cancun one more night. Not because she was stranded. Because she still believed Jason would somehow fix everything. I quit my job before we left. I heard. I thought we'd be starting over. You did. Another long silence. Finally, she asked the question she'd really called to ask. Can you turn one card back on? I almost admired her nerve. Nicole. Yeah. You helped steal my husband. I know. You helped steal my identity. I didn't know about that. The police disagree. She gasped. The police, they've already visited me. The silence that followed lasted almost 20 seconds. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. What do you mean, police? They're investigating Jason. No, they're investigating both of you. She hung up. That evening, Detective Ellis called. Did Nicole contact you today? Yes. What did she say? I repeated the conversation almost word for word. He listened carefully. Interesting. What? She's beginning to panic, I noticed. We've obtained additional records. He paused. There are unpaid federal tax obligations connected to your husband. I rubbed my forehead. How bad? Let's just say significantly worse than we first believed. So the successful businessman wasn't successful. I'm afraid not. After hanging up, I found myself laughing. Real laughter. Not because any of this was funny. Because Jason had spent years pretending to be wealthier than he really was. The expensive golf clubs? Financed. The luxury truck? Leased. The designer watch he loved showing off. According to investigators, counterfeit. I remembered all the times Nicole had complimented his lifestyle. She had never been in love with Jason. She had been in love with the version he invented. Saturday afternoon, my sister insisted I leave the house. We're going to lunch. I'm not hungry. I didn't ask. She drove us to a small cafe in downtown Carmel. People chatted over soup and sandwiches. Children laughed outside near the fountain. Life was wonderfully ordinary. Laura watched me push my salad around the plate. You know something? What? You're still waiting for him to become the man you thought you married. I guess I am. That man never existed. Her words stung, mostly because they were true. You don't have to rebuild your whole life today, she said. You just have to stop rebuilding his. Monday morning brought another surprise. Detective Moreno called before I left for work. They've left Cancun. What? Your husband and Ms. Sanders checked out unexpectedly. Coming home? We don't believe so. Where are they going? We're not certain. Later that afternoon, the detective called again. This time her voice carried something I hadn't heard before. Excitement. We know what happened. What? They attempted to fly to Belize. Why? We think your husband believed there was no extradition risk. And they never boarded. Why not? The airline flagged his passport. I sat down slowly. Flagged. Federal investigators had already entered an alert. So they stopped him. Mexican authorities questioned both of them. My heart pounded. What happens now? We're coordinating with them. She couldn't tell me much more. Only that Jason's financial problems had become larger than simple identity theft. Much larger. That night, just before midnight, my phone buzzed again. Jason. I almost ignored it. Instead, I answered. His voice sounded completely different. Gone was the arrogance. Gone was the confidence. Emily, what? I need your help. I waited. They took my passport. I know. His breathing grew heavier. They're asking questions. I imagine they are. I didn't mean for this to happen. For the first time all week, I believed him. Not because he was innocent. Because I honestly didn't think he'd expected the consequences to catch up with him this quickly. You made your choices, Jason. I'll fix everything. You can't. I never wanted to hurt you. I looked around my quiet living room, the empty chair where he'd watched football every Sunday, the family photos I still hadn't taken down. Then I answered as calmly as I could. You already did. I ended the call. This time, I didn't cry afterward. 3 weeks passed before I saw Jason again. Not in my living room. Not across a dinner table. Not pulling into the driveway after work. I saw him in handcuffs. The television above the waiting area at my office happened to be tuned to the local Indianapolis news when the story broke. The anchor looked straight into the camera. Federal and state investigators announced today that 2 Indiana residents have been detained in connection with an ongoing financial fraud investigation involving identity theft and fraudulent loan applications. The screen changed to footage from Indianapolis International Airport. 2 deputies escorted Jason through a secure entrance. Nicole followed several feet behind him. She looked nothing like the confident woman from the Cancun selfie. Her shoulders slumped. Her hair was tied back carelessly. She kept looking at the floor as photographers shouted questions. One of my coworkers slowly turned up the volume. Authorities say the investigation began several months ago and expanded after additional financial records surfaced. Nobody in the office spoke? Then Denise quietly picked up the remote and turned the television off. She looked at me. You okay? I took a slow breath. I think I finally will be. Over the next month, my life revolved around meetings with investigators, attorneys, and banks. Every week, another fraudulent account appeared. Another fake signature. Another application with my name attached to it. Thankfully, the evidence overwhelmingly supported me. Security cameras showed Jason visiting banks alone. Electronic records matched devices registered in his name. Investigators even recovered scanned copies of my driver's license and social security card from his laptop. The detective later told me something that still made my stomach turn. Jason had photographed those documents while I was visiting my mother in Ohio after her knee replacement surgery. He had texted me every evening asking how Mom was recovering. Then after hanging up, he used my identity to apply for loans. That realization hurt more deeply than the affair itself. About 6 weeks later, I received a subpoena. I was scheduled to testify in Marion County Superior Court. The night before my appearance, I barely slept. Not because I feared Jason, because I hated confrontation. I always had. Growing up, I was the kid who apologized even when someone else stepped on my foot. Standing in a courtroom while strangers discussed my marriage sounded like a nightmare. My sister Laura drove me downtown. You don't have to be perfect, she reminded me. You only have to tell the truth. I know. Truth doesn't need a good memory. I smiled. Dad used to say that. He was right. The courthouse buzzed with quiet conversations and echoing footsteps. Lawyers hurried through the hallways carrying thick folders. Families sat nervously on wooden benches. Life-changing moments were happening behind nearly every courtroom door. Mine was simply one of many. When I entered, Jason was already seated beside his attorney. For the first time in years, he looked ordinary. No expensive suit. No polished confidence. Just a tired man wearing a plain gray jacket. He glanced toward me. Our eyes met briefly. Then he looked away. Nicole sat several rows behind him. She looked even worse. She had lost weight. Dark circles rested beneath her eyes. The confident smile from Cancun had completely disappeared. When I took the witness stand, the prosecutor asked simple questions. Please state your name. Emily Carter. Did you authorize Mr. Jason Carter to apply for loans using your identity? No. Did you sign these documents? No. Whose signature is this? It isn't mine. One by one, documents appeared on large courtroom monitors. Loan applications. Forged signatures. Copies of my identification. Bank transfers. Emails. Phone records. Everything lined up. Everything pointed in the same direction. Jason. Then came the surprise. The prosecutor displayed several text messages recovered from Jason's phone. One read, "Don't worry, Emily never checks the paperwork." Another, "Her credit is worth more than mine." Another, "Once we leave, she'll figure it out too late." The courtroom grew noticeably quieter. Even Jason's attorney looked uncomfortable. Then the defense tried something I never expected. Jason's attorney stood. "Mrs. Carter?" "Yes." "Isn't it true that you managed the household finances?" "Yes." "So it's possible you approved these transactions and simply forgot." I almost laughed. Instead, I answered calmly, "I remember paying my electric bill." A few people smiled. "I remember renewing our homeowner's insurance." Another smile. "I remember buying groceries." I paused. But I believe I would have remembered borrowing over $200,000. Even the judge couldn't completely hide a small grin. The defense quickly changed direction. Then everything shifted. Nicole asked to speak. Her attorney whispered urgently. She insisted. The judge allowed it. Nicole slowly walked toward the witness stand. She looked at Jason only once. He refused to look back. After taking the oath, she wiped away tears. "I need to tell the truth." The courtroom became perfectly still. "Mr. Carter told me," she began quietly, "that he stayed married because Emily had excellent credit." Jason suddenly looked up. "Nicole," his attorney grabbed his arm. She continued. "He said divorcing her too early would have ruined his plans." I felt every eye in the courtroom move toward Jason. Nicole kept talking. "He told me Emily controlled all the money." She shook her head. "That wasn't true." "He controlled the lies." Tears rolled down her face. "I believed him." The prosecutor asked gently, "Did you know he was using Mrs. Carter's identity?" "No, I swear I didn't." "Did you ever help submit loan applications?" "I scanned documents." She closed her eyes. "I thought they were business papers." The courtroom remained silent. For the first time since this nightmare began, someone besides me was admitting exactly how thoroughly Jason had manipulated everyone around him. A week later came sentencing. The courtroom was far more crowded than before. Local reporters filled the back rows. A few cameras waited outside. The judge spent nearly 20 minutes reviewing the evidence. Then he looked directly at Jason. "Mr. Carter, this case is not simply about financial fraud." He paused. "It is about calculated betrayal." The judge continued. "You exploited the trust of your own wife for personal financial gain. You involved another individual through repeated deception. And when confronted, you attempted to flee." Jason stared silently at the defense table. The sentence followed. Several years in state prison for fraud-related offenses, identity theft, and financial crimes. Nicole avoided prison after fully cooperating with investigators, but she received probation, heavy financial penalties, and permanent damage to her professional reputation. Nothing about that felt joyful. It felt finished. As everyone slowly filed out of the courtroom, reporters rushed toward the hallway. Someone called my name. "Mrs. Carter, do you have a statement?" I stopped walking. For a moment, I considered saying nothing. Instead, I answered honestly. I didn't come here looking for revenge. I looked toward the courtroom doors. I came here looking for the truth. Then I walked away. For the first time in months. Nobody followed me. 6 months after Jason was sentenced, I stood in my backyard on a cool Saturday morning, holding a paintbrush instead of a stack of legal documents. If someone had told me the previous year that I would eventually enjoy repainting my fence, I would have laughed. But life has a funny way of changing your definition of peace. These days, peace looked a lot different. It looked like drinking coffee on my back porch before sunrise. It looked like knowing every bill in my mailbox actually belonged to me. It looked like sleeping through the night without checking my phone. Most of all, it looked like silence that no longer felt lonely. The first thing I did after everything was over was take down the family pictures. Not because I wanted to erase my past. Because I wanted my home to reflect my present. I packed the photographs carefully into a storage box in the basement. I didn't burn them. I didn't rip them apart. Those years had been real to me, even if Jason hadn't been the man I believed he was. Some memories deserved respect. Others deserved distance. There is a difference. Work slowly became enjoyable again. The fraud investigation finally ended. The banks restored every account. Every fraudulent loan was removed from my credit history. The day my credit score returned to exactly where it had been before all of this started, I almost framed the email. Instead, I treated myself to something much smaller. A blueberry muffin from a little bakery downtown. It cost $4.25. It tasted better than any expensive dinner Jason had ever insisted on paying for with money we didn't actually have. Denise laughed when I walked into the office carrying an extra box. "Celebrating I got my identity back. She smiled. I'd say that's worth a muffin. It's worth two. One afternoon Laura called. Busy Saturday. Not really. Come with me. Where? You'll see. She drove us to the Hamilton County Humane Society. I thought you said we were shopping. We are. For what? She pointed toward a row of kennels. For a roommate. I laughed. I don't need a dog. 5 minutes later, a golden retriever mix walked over and quietly rested his head against my knee. He didn't bark. He didn't jump. He simply looked at me with patient brown eyes. The volunteer smiled. His name's Charlie. Charlie. I reached down and scratched behind his ears. He leaned against my leg like we'd known each other for years. Laura crossed her arms. So, I sighed. You planned this. I absolutely planned this. Charlie came home with me that afternoon. For the first few weeks, he followed me everywhere. Kitchen, laundry room, living room. He even waited outside the bathroom door. Neighbors joked that I'd adopted a furry security guard. Maybe I had. Or maybe Charlie understood something I didn't. Healing is easier when someone is quietly happy you're home. That fall, I joined a weekend hiking group that explored parks across central Indiana. On our first trip to Brown County State Park, I almost canceled. I didn't know anyone. I wasn't especially athletic. The weather forecast called for chilly temperatures. Laura refused to let me back out. Just go. So I did. The leaves were turning brilliant shades of red and gold. The trails smelled like damp earth and fallen leaves. Halfway through the hike, an older woman named Carol started walking beside me. She asked the usual questions. Married? I smiled. Not anymore. Recently. About 6 months. She nodded knowingly. My husband passed away 4 years ago. I'm sorry. I'm not. I looked at her surprised. She laughed softly. He was a wonderful man. I miss him. But I finally learned something. What? Our lives don't end when someone leaves. That sentence stayed with me for weeks. Not long afterward, Detective Ellis called one final time. I thought you'd like to know. Know what? The case is officially closed. I appreciate everything you did. You did the hard part. No. I smiled. You did. Before hanging up, he added something unexpected. My wife watched how calmly you handled all of this. I laughed. I wasn't calm. You looked calm. That's different. It gave her courage. Courage for what? To leave a bad situation she'd been avoiding with a family member. His words caught me off guard. Sometimes we never realize our story becomes part of someone else's. About a month before Christmas, I received one final envelope. The return address listed the Indiana Department of Correction. I already knew who had written it. Jason. Charlie watched from the couch as I stood in the kitchen holding the unopened letter. For nearly 10 minutes, I debated whether to read it. Maybe he wanted forgiveness. Maybe he wanted money. Maybe he wanted another chance. In the past, curiosity would have won. This time it didn't. I carried the envelope into my home office, opened the bottom drawer of my desk, placed it inside, closed the drawer. That was enough. Some conversations don't deserve another chapter. Every now and then, people still ask whether I regret canceling those credit cards, whether I feel guilty that everything unraveled so quickly afterward. My answer is always the same. No, not because I wanted Jason or Nicole to suffer, because adults live with the consequences of the choices they make. I didn't strand them in Cancun. They bought those plane tickets. I didn't steal anyone's identity. I simply refused to keep financing people who believed honesty was optional. There's a difference, a very important one. Looking back now, I realize the greatest surprise wasn't discovering my husband had betrayed me. It was discovering how much stronger I was than I had ever given myself credit for. For years, I thought Jason was the foundation of my life. The truth was much simpler. I had built that life. I had earned the house. I had protected my credit. I had shown up to work every day. I had kept promises. When he walked away, he didn't take my future. He only took the illusion that I needed him to have one. If you've ever been betrayed, I hope you remember this: someone else's dishonesty doesn't get to define the rest of your life. Sometimes the ending you never wanted becomes the beginning you never expected. Thank you for spending this time with me and listening to my story. I truly appreciate it, and I hope you'll join me again for the next one.